Hey folks, this is Colonial, and it's been quite a long time. I'll be bringing you some Dominions 5 content today. The last stuff I brought you was Dominions 4. My real life has gotten very busy, but for those of you watching in the future, this is. We're having our coronavirus issue right now, so we're all locked indoors. Mostly the entire world is, and I have quite a bit of time on my hands, so I figured that I would record a game that I played earlier this year. Um, it is multiplayer, you'll be happy to hear. And in fact, two other people have recorded this game for YouTube as well, I believe. So I should link to their YouTube playlists in the description for this first video, maybe for the next one, which will be number 1. This is number 0 as well. But I will be playing as Caelum again. I've played for you as Caelum in the past, but this time I will be middle-aged Caelum, whereas last time I was early-aged Caelum. And Dominions 5 has changed some things as well. Also, I like to think that I've somewhat improved as a player in the past couple years. I still play now and again, on and off multiplayer Dominions. And what I'm doing now, unlike last time, is when I'm playing one game, I basically only play that game. Or in this one's case, I played two separate games, both with middle-aged Calum. So that's giving me some more time to think about the game a bit more. And I hope I've improved as a player. But let us look at the nation I will be wielding. First of all, every Calum has someone like this. Where is he gone? This Spire Horn Seraph. I believe he is exactly the same as the one from the last stage. So he's very cheap for a level 1 priest with no holy. He's like 5 militias in cost for this guy. And he researches. He does Air 1. So I am taking as part of my bless some Magic 3 scales to make the most out of this little guy. Um, so he's there. He's useful. He can storm power up to storm 2, do this and that. He can fly in storms. He's a good guy to have around. Um, he would be my workhorse research mage, but I actually also have this guy as the middle age only. Almost exactly the same here, insofar as he's 45 gold for level 1 mage, but he gets me water. So between those two guys, they're going to be my researchers. Aside from having some water ones alongside my air ones, this guy has two other useful traits. He has a forge bonus. So he can forge water trinkets for 4 gems instead of 5. With a water ring, which he gets for 4 gems, he can forge water 2 stuff for 9 gems. With a hammer, he can forge water 1s for 2 gems, water 2s for 7 gems. So, I mean, it's not the best forge bonus of any nation ever. Water is a bit underwhelming, but he's handy to have, and I will definitely be making use of this forge bonus. But also, he has this, which means he produces resources for me. So that'll be 4 resources per cold scale. So at heat scales or at normal, he doesn't help. Cold 1, he adds 4 resources. Cold 2, he adds 8. Cold 3, he adds 12. So I will be using these guys more as my workhorse researchers, not because they're better researchers, but because they up my resources in my fort. And then these guys, unusually for Calum, my Spire Horns will just be occasional grabs to add to the diversity of my research force. Those are, and in fact, they're not my only level 1 mages that I'm going to be playing with, because I also have this guy. He's not a mage normally, but he's a handy boy. Or handy girl, I guess. 70, so less upkeep because he's holy. He's stealthy, level 1 priest, with a 20% chance of fire magic. So 1 in 5 of these guys is going to be my third kind of level 1 mage in fire. It's my only fire research, so I want to get these guys for that. He also has leadership 40. So he can ferry people around. He can scout in a pinch. He can hold gems for my army. Hide behind the army with my gem pool. So a lot of things that I would need a flying scout for, he works. And because, I mean, he's much more expensive than the flying scout, but they're both cheap. he only takes 1 recruitment point. That's important to keep in mind as well. And grabbing these guys is better because they have that fire chance, and that's how I get my fire. He can preach an enemy dominion, but not very well. These guys are a handy piece of the puzzle, even though they're not a mage. So that's my cheap stuff. Are those 3? I then have my more serious mages. Caelum, one of the strengths of the nation, is these guys. 2 recruitment points, secured holy 2. I mean, secured heir 2. They're the same in every age. In the late age, they're only out of the capital, but here, same as the early age, they're everywhere. They're great. They're my battle mage. I use them. Another strength of the middle-aged Caelum is this little gent. Slow to recruit, but not capital only. And he's secured air 3, water 2. It's my only source of bigger numbers for anything other than air. And he can get water up to 3, air up to 4. Middle-aged, that's pretty rare. I think there's 3 nations that can do it now. But he's recruit anywhere, which I might be the only one who has a recruit anywhere air 4. He also gets me Astral and Death up to level 1. Astral and Death are both interesting ones to have at level 1 because it means I can sight search using their national spells. The Death one, of course, overpriced, like to avoid. Astral one, quite good. Arcane Probing is something these guys will likely be doing, but they might also be doing some Dark Knowledge. So I should be able to get... These guys are also... Well, in terms of sight searching, they're strong, but with the slow recruit, it'll be between my Caelian Seraphs and my High Seraphs to be doing that. So those are my recruitable mages. Now, you may notice that my magic diversity is garbage tier. In fact, this guy, every path and combination of paths that I can get on this High Seraph, with the exception of that fire. So my magic diversity is 4 air, 3 water, 1 astral, 1 death, brings me to 9. Plus the 1 fire, 10. 10 is terrible tier. So I have no magic diversity. All I can do is air and water. I can do some water, not even that great at water. I'm very good at air. And everything else is like crumb tier. This is one of the fun things about the middle age of Caelum is I have no earth magic at all. This is the no earth version of Caelum. So that's great. No earth, no nature, yeah. So I have 6 different paths I can, no, 5 different paths I can get. No earth, no nature, no blood. So that's great. I do have this other guy. He is a leadership 80, so he's going to be handy for that. He's only 1 recruitment point as well, but he has resources 36. So another reason why, like, those are my 2 guys. I also have this guy's garbage, even more resources, not enough leadership to form a line. He's only blobs for him. He's bad. I think I recruit him once by accident. One of those cases where you accidentally grab that guy instead of that guy. But normally, if I want a general, it'll be between him for the leadership that'll allow my troops to get formations, or him because he can bless is not needed because my sacred is shit. I'll show you in a minute, but he can go stealthy, he can hide, and more importantly, if I don't need the lines, I'll grab him. Well, if I don't need the lines, I'll grab him for the chance of fire. But also, he only needs 2 resources. So if I'm anyway resource constrained, I grab a Seraphine. If I have resources coming out my ears, I can grab a general. And that's it for my generals. Basically, I have the scout who flies. Useful. I do use them. While I'm here, there's an issue with storm flying. If someone casts Perpetual Storm, it's a real big problem for me. It's always a problem for Caelum. And for middle-aged Caelum, my only answers that have storm flying are my Spirehorn Seraph. So I can get level 1 air on my battle mages during a Perpetual Storm, and my Storm Generals, but not my Seraphines. That is my commanders. Now we're going to take a minute to look at the troops. Holy, I'm a sad panda. I've got No holies with wings. I've got the Temple Guard, who's a heavy infantry with. Oh yeah, one thing about this nation, almost everyone I own has ice armor. So I'm very I like the cold scales. My own Dominion, of course, is going to max out its cold scales. But when it's cold, my armor is very good. When it's warm, my armor melts off. My troops essentially melt in the heat. So that's a big problem for this nation. But well, let's do this in terms of what I'm actually using first of all. My workhorses are the Spirehorn Archer. He's just a standard archer who flies. There's nothing special about him. He flies in a storm if it's ever needed, but the arrows basically when you have a storm immunity on an archer, they don't get the precision penalty, but 50% of arrows during a storm get knocked out by water and fall to the ground. That still happens with these guys, but the 50% that do get through don't have a precision penalty, and also they can fly during a perpetual storm. But these guys are good because I can get wind guide very easily. I can mass these guys with a wind guide. They get the job done. So that's one of my workhorses. The other ones are these two right here, very similar. The Spirehorn Warrior with a lance and the Arya Light Infantry with a lance. The Arya is a better unit, but the Spirehorn is cheaper on the resources a bit, so I can get more than when I'm resource capped, which happens quite a bit. And they fly during a storm. So I mean, sure, when the perpetual storm is up, but even when I have storm on the battlefield, these guys fly through it, hit them in the face. Whereas these guys are all pinned when I have a storm on my battlefields. So basically, the way it works is very early I get these guys for the resources. Later on, when it comes to early game wars, I switch to these guys. When the mid game rolls around, I have storms on my battlefields. I switch back to these guys, and they are a lot of my armies. Them, except when I'm doing a wind guide strategy, I use these guys. Sometimes in the event of storm, it'll be nice to have these guys. They are just a sword infantry. They walk. They don't fly during a storm, which is an asset because they're fodder that holds the line, defends my mages and my archers, but they are bad. They are very low quality. Size 3, crummy stats for size 2. They're a weak front line if I really need a front line. I also have two heavy options. They're quite similar to my light infantry warriors over here insofar as one flies in storms, one does not. But the resources are different. This guy, the dark winged ones, they're the Spirehorn Caelians. The white wings are the Arya Caelians. I have two clans this age basically, and the dark winged ones are the ones that fly during storms. Even up here, my Spirehorn Seraph and my Storm General with dark wings fly in storms. So I have the two heavy infantries this time. While the resources are different, the big difference is that this Iceclad that doesn't fly during storms, his protection is big. He has 17 in cold 0. Ice protection 2 means that in cold 3 he has 23 protection, which is very good for an infantry. Whereas this guy here, he only has 14. He has 20. So it's still good. But in practice, it feels like the Iceclads are harder to die than these guys. The resource difference is a difference, but really it's do I want the beefier dudes, or do I want to fly in a storm? Sometimes it's also valuable to have these guys not fly in storms, although usually because they have the lance, I want them to. That's basically it for my flying guys. I have some chaff, they're bad. I have this guy, the Wingless. The Wingless is only recruited in my capital. He's not holy. He's a good, like I said, that this guy here, the Arya Infantry, he has he's a front line that can fly around and then sit tight during the storm to walk slowly forward. He's a bad front line. This guy here, he's a very good front line. I mean, he's not like top tier, but I'm Caelum, and he's like mid tier or better. He's a very solid guy to have. He's size 2. He, of course, doesn't fly. So, and he only comes out of my capital. So he just kind of sits around near the capital. My other wingless options are my 2 holies. Holy is worth, they're not good enough to bless. I haven't blessed them at all. But this guy is, like I said, this guy is good. He's solid. He's a mid-tier frontline infantry for any nation. For Caelum, that's amazing. This guy's very good. This guy's an actual rock-hard heavy infantry, even without a bless. And the problem is I am pinned to only producing, he comes only out of the capital. I can only get as many of them as my bless allows. But they win in a fist fight against other size 2 non-flying guys. So that's great. And they're worth sometimes recruiting. I also have this guy. He's an archer, which it's dumb to have an archer who can't fly. But he has a magic bow. The way this works is I believe flaming arrows doesn't match with this. But flaming arrows is much harder for me to get than wind guide. And wind guide does match with it. So if I need an archer and don't care about him flying, these guys are better. I can only recruit as many of them as my holy points. I do actually have access to flaming arrows through my Seraphine. So it's not inconceivable with middle-aged Caelum. But in practice, I'm not going to have it very often. These guys are better archers who can't fly. These guys are rock-solid infantry who can't fly. These guys are medium infantry who can't fly. I have elephants. It's best not to use them for expansion, although you can if you have to. The big problem with them expanding is flying expanders is excellent. They can't fly. They could potentially serve a purpose. I don't think I actually use them at all this game, but they're there to keep in mind that I can use them, basically. Now, all that being said, let's take a look at the god I went for. The god I went for is a rainbow. As you know, as I just mentioned, my magic diversity is garbage. So rainbow makes a lot of sense with this nation. I went with, let's do this in order. Let's do this stuff. I went with Magic 3. I told you that Magic 3 is a big help. Of the one thing that I'm most happy with in this build, it's the Magic 3. It means, basically, I don't have anything. I can't really fight until I get Alteration 4 for Wind Guide. My armies just die because they're bad. So getting the research up means I have my research goals before anyone else. Very important. I went with Growth 3. Basically right now in the meta, Growth is overpowered, so everyone goes with Growth 3. I went with Growth 3. That's fine. I like Cold 3, naturally. It's very important to hang on to that. That's key to my nation. Trying to remember how I did this. I do have that guy that produces productivity, or produces resources. So while I'm resource constrained, I only went with 1 productivity, and then in the longer term, there's no way to up your whatever they call it that order produces your this stuff. Recruitment points. This is the only way to increase it. So when I max that one out, that way I can have a bunch of the ice crafters sitting there enough that I can produce all my recruitment points. This was alright. Ideally I'd like to have that, but I couldn't afford it. I also went with 1 misfortune so that I could afford my build. I went dormant. Dormant's okay. Awake is fun for. I rarely go with an awake for rainbow because the extra site searching is not really worth the points. I know a lot of people like an awake rainbow, but I don't really. I didn't go completely bless free. I did actually do this. This is nice. It gets me into the fire. I have the fire 1. This way I can get basically all the fire boosters, which could be handy. It also gets me, more importantly, inspirational presence. You notice that I had those 2 generals. One of the generals is holy, and I'm going to be using him for generaling a lot. So the inspirational presence means that he automatically gets 1 point of leadership, inspirational. So he basically, aside from the fact that they can't form a line, he's now as good a leader as the other guy. And it's nice, particularly early game. I'm expanding with him as my general. My expansion armies tend to run away. This way they generally don't. It improves one of my two leaders. I'm happy with it. I'm not sure it was the best use of resources, but it's definitely viable. One thing is I'm not using these days in Dominions there is a popular balance mod. The popular balance mod makes it so that um it makes this a more valuable bless if you're playing with that mod, because suddenly all your fire seraphins have a nice new spell basically. But that didn't matter for me, but I still went with this. Air 2, just why not? Really, I'll tell you why I went with the Air 2 in a minute. I went with Earth 3. Wait a minute. What have I done wrong? This doesn't match up at all. Alright, I went with boom, 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 boom. Maybe he was imprisoned. Yeah, he was imprisoned. Right, he was imprisoned. Excuse me. That's what I went with. Okay. Yeah, dormant's better than imprisoned, but imprisoned is fine. I didn't really cry for not having him earlier, let's say. Yeah, this was my build. The Earth 3, that gets me, as soon as he comes out, he can build hammers. It's my only way to get hammers. Also, he can build boots, Earth boots. That plus this means that I can potentially get elemental staff, because I can forge both air boosters. He can forge the Earth booster. That gets me 4/4. That gets me another elemental staff. Elemental staffs are really valuable for this nation. It boosts, like, 3 of my big paths are elemental, all of which could do with some more boosting. Astral 3, that gives me all the astral boosters. It also gets me up to Astral 5 to do big astral stuff, basically. Death 3 as well. I mean, both of these, I get natural 1. I get gems I'd like to spend. My god being there does that for me. I get crystal magic, which is important because crystal shield is something that, I mean, if I don't have good fire income when the god comes out, he can forge a crystal shield, give it to one of my fire ones who can then do flaming arrows. I think this is a nice. I mean, like I said, I was playing another game at the same time, and in the other game, I did something like, I think that, yeah, I did that. So I lost the inspirational presence. In exchange, I gained a point of productivity. And I'm not sure. I mean, this one's probably better later on. The other one's a bit better earlier. But they're both fine ways to do it. In this game, I went with this. The one thing that I kind of regret from this build is the 6th Dominion, because I really want that cold. And with the 6th Dominion, it's hard to push the cold out into my enemy's lands. If it were perfect, I could go with 8 Dominion. It's really hard, as you see, to do that on a rainbow. 7 might have been more viable. I could have done like that. Let's say maybe not take one less scale somewhere there. Probably that. Um, that's fine. But I went with the 6. Like I said, if I had to do it again, I would probably go with 7. Not sure that's exactly how I would redo the scales. Maybe I would do like that, something like that. But here's my god. He looks like this, and I named him Alfred. How do you spell that? Alfred Hitchcock. Because, I'm the birds, so he's Alfred Hitchcock. All right, that is my build. I will see you next episode for the first couple of turns.